Hello, and welcome to Dementia Unplugged, ARTFul Insights. This is a new partnership program from Dementia Society of America and ARTZ Philadelphia. I'm Susan Shifrin, the founder and executive director of ARTZ Philadelphia, and I am so looking forward to spending the next half hour or so with you. So, what is ARTFul Insights? We are producing live programming each month and these videos each month. In both cases, we'll be looking at works of art together from museums and art centers and other cultural institutions across our country. So from one month to the next, you might see, if you come to our program, which we hope you will, you might have the opportunity to see pieces from a museum that's around the corner from you, or a museum or art center that's halfway across the country. Every month, we will be at a different institution. So just to give you more of a sense of how we'll be spending the next 30 minutes or so together. The idea with ARTFul Insights is that we will be focusing on your enjoying the works of art and our conversation together at your own pace, whenever you like. The video is available 24/7. If you are sitting and watching the video with somebody, with a family member or a friend, we will give you time during the video to pause and look again at your own pace at a particular work. There are no wrong answers. There are no wrong thoughts. When I ask questions to get our juices flowing, as we say, there are no right or wrong answers to those questions. There are your answers. There are your thoughts, your observations, your ideas. We will start first and foremost with what we can see together, what we can observe together, and what we can experience together. What I'd like to do now, without further ado, is to introduce you a little more formally to the museum where we will be spending our time today. Obviously, spending our time virtually, but spending our time nonetheless. We have been invited to view the collections of the McMullen Museum of Art at Boston College. So we'll be virtually visiting Massachusetts. And I want to tell you a little bit about the McMullen Museum. So here we are at the entrance to the McMullen Museum of Art at Boston College. The McMullen Museum of Art is a little bit outside of Boston in Massachusetts. And it had its beginnings about 30 years ago as an art history department gallery at Boston College. The McMullen has made its reputation as quite unique among other university art museums in that many of the exhibitions, much of the research done at the museum is driven by faculty from across the disciplines at Boston College. And what is at the core of all of this is the spirit of exploration, of looking to museum objects and artifacts as the sources of wisdom, of historical meaning, and of academic rigor and, as I said, inquiry. The McMullen has a really wonderful, extensive online presence for its collections. So I'm showing you here the page from the McMullen's website that you can go to after we spend our time together today. And you can peruse the collections in your own time, at your own leisure. It really, the McMullen has quite a striking diversity of works from Haiti to textiles, as well as contemporary works, photography, you name it. The McMullen has it. So I really do encourage you to take a look at their online database of works. And speaking of inquiry and exploration, I'm delighted that we finally arrived at the point in this video where we actually get to look at some art together. So just a reminder that the way this works is I will ask a few questions just to get us going. But above all, I want you to keep in mind that the questions I ask are not soliciting any particular answer. There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. I'm just looking for your answer. What do you see? What stands out to you? So take some time and do a little exploring. And then we'll come back together again and talk about what you've got on your mind. So I asked you to take a few minutes to look at the painting in front of you and to just give yourself a chance to absorb what you see. So what did you see? I wonder if you were going to write down a list of all of the things that you've noticed in just a few minutes of looking at this painting. What do you think would be on that list? Would it be things? Would it be a sense or a feeling, an atmosphere? Would it be sounds that you imagine hearing as you're looking at this painting? And it would be wonderful to talk about what you saw and where your eye went first. And then after it started looking, where did your eyes travel? This is something I actually ask quite a lot when we're looking at paintings together. Where do your eyes take you first? And then where do they lead you after that? Almost as though we're walking into the painting. I know that's a slightly strange concept, but again, it's something that you'll hear me talk about because it's a way of drawing ourselves into the painting and feeling what's happening in the painting in a very visceral and tangible way. Let me share with you a little bit of what our participants in our online group thought about when they first looked at this painting. Peggy chimed in and said, it's just a delightful painting. There's so much to see. Peggy said that first when she looked at it, she thought maybe it's some sort of oasis in the desert because she saw, let me see if I can get a little bit of a sense of the background. as we get closer, do you see this kind of golden background through all the trees, behind all the plants? Peggy said to her, it looked like it might be the sand of a desert. And so she wondered, is this a depiction of an oasis in the middle of the desert? What do you think of these suggestions? Does it look to you like it might be a sudden oasis in the midst of a broad and wide desert with an intense blue sky overhead? Maybe this looked so rich and so full of animals and plants because if it's an oasis, it's in a concentrated, closed space with all the sand of the desert around it. Something else Peggy then brought up is while she was thinking about, is it a desert with an oasis? She said, it popped into my head that it might be something like the Garden of Eden. So my question then for our group and for you is, when you think of the Garden of Eden, what do you think of? Do you think of something that looks like this, or something that looks quite different? What would a landscape need to have in it for you to think of the Garden of Eden? So when I asked that question, Robin piped up and said, when I think of the Garden of Eden, I think it's imaginary. And so I was fascinated by Robin's observation. And so I asked her, Robin, does this feel like an imaginary place to you? And her response built on what Susan had said and also what Peggy had said. Susan and Peggy had commented on how rich this is, full of things to see, full of life and activity. And so Robin said, where would you see all these animals and all these different fruits and sky and dust? Where would you see all of these things in one place? So yes, she said, it feels like an imaginary place that has brought all of these amazing things together. I mean, take a look. This is something we didn't talk about in our group, but I just am wondering, look at these kind of exotic looking flowers, and then look at these leaves. Do they look like they come from the same climate even, or the same geographical location? And then we have these daisy-like flowers, which we might more expect to see in a field in the Midwest of the United States rather than in a desert oasis or in a jungle or in an exotic garden. So just something else to think about. So as we talked more and more about all these kind of summons to our creativity and our imagination, the orange trees and the green trees, the grapes hanging near the peaches. And as Robin pointed out, that pineapple that she had seen very early on when she looked at the painting the first time, well, as she said, what's that pineapple doing? It's just hanging there. It doesn't look like it's attached to any branches of any particular plant or tree. That's a little unusual. And then, while she was thinking about how unusual the position of the pineapple is, she said, and look, if we look at the zebra that's right below the pineapple, The pineapple is almost as big as the zebra. So this introduced to us the idea of scale and size in this painting. We've already talked about how there are all these different flowers and fruits and animals whom we'd expect to see in completely different areas of the world even. But we hadn't really talked about the size of things. And so Robin pointed out, yeah, that is one large pineapple. Question is, not that we necessarily have an answer, but why would the artist paint it as such a large fruit? What are the other large pieces of this painting? If we move away from the painting, make it, as though we were getting farther away from it. If we were standing in front of it, we'd be moving back from it. We see some structural elements that we might not have noticed when we were right in the middle of it all. So this looks like a tree with palm leaves, I guess, coming out of the top. And it looks like there's another one right over here. So it's almost as though they're creating a gateway to the painting. Do you see what I mean? And then, of course, there's the canopy of peaches that Robin first mentioned. But none of us had really noticed that right down the center of the painting, there is, I guess, what is the trunk of a peach tree. I don't know how many of you are familiar with peach trees. Seems kind of unlikely to me, in my experience with peach trees, that they would be as tall as a palm tree. But then that ties into everything we've been talking about, doesn't it? That it doesn't matter whether it's an unusual size, a size we're not used to seeing. Because as Robin said, this is a picture, it's not a real thing. The artist can paint anything they want. And that led us to think about, not only can the artist paint anything, because after all, they're the artist, but they're in some way creating a playground for us, a visual playground in which we can almost see anything we want. What do you think of that idea? A painting as a playground for us, for our visual senses, even for our, I think I might have asked earlier, when you first looked at this painting at the very beginning, did you hear anything? Would you imagine that this perhaps imaginary place is filled with sound? Or do you think it's very quiet? Sometimes I will ask in these videos and in our live discussions, what title would you give this painting? And there's a method to my madness. I ask that because sometimes if we're called upon to actually come up with a title, it's actually a way of pulling together in our minds all of the things that we've seen and thought, and then creating the essence of that in a few words. So, just before we move on to our next work, I want to tell you a little bit about this. And so the artist himself who painted this is a Haitian artist whose last name is Abelard. His first name is Gessner, so Gessner Abelard. He was born in 1922 in Haiti. And while we don't have an exact date for this painting, the staff at the McMullen believe it's probably somewhere in the 1960s. Now, it's hard when we're looking at a work of art like this on our screens. It's hard to figure out exactly how big or how small this painting is. And you may remember that a little earlier, I got us really close, and it almost felt as though we were enveloped by the painting, right? So that might make you think, is the painting going to be most impactful if it's large, maybe life-size? Well, in fact, this painting is not life-size. It's about 2 feet by a little more than 3 feet. So it's not a tiny painting, but by no means is it a life-size painting. And I wonder what you think about that. If you think that looking at it on a wall, it might look something like that, if you're standing not too far away from it. Does that inform or change at all your earlier responses to the painting? The painting itself is made of oil paint on beaver board. So I asked you to think of your title for this painting. And I want to just tell you the title we have for the painting. And that is Jungle Scene with Animals. Now, my guess is you came up with something much more creative, much more evocative. One of our group members said that she would call this tropical oasis. That was Robin. She had first thought about tropical zoo, but then she said, actually, no, there are no bars keeping these animals in. This is a painting of freedom. So she said tropical oasis. So I like to say sometimes when we move from one painting to the next, and now for something completely different. Although I wonder if we'll find by the end of our conversation, is it completely different than our Haitian painting, or are there some areas where they overlap? Right here, we see the figure of a little child. Now, what's interesting is who we see on either side of that little child. Here and here. So, does anything come to mind? We might also want to look, this is very much in the foreground of the painting. In fact, if we look at the painting, this is more or less the center line right here. So this group of three, lion, young child, lamb, are pretty much centrally located in the painting. Now, that's something that an artist will often do, particularly in a painting that is realist or natural, painted naturalistically. That's something that an artist will do to tell us what's important in the painting. It's hard to miss here, isn't it? We can't exactly look away from this group of three. But there is something else going on in the background. And that was something that our participant, Robin, mentioned almost immediately. Because, as I had with the last painting, I asked everyone to just take the time to look and see what you see in this painting. So, what do we see here? Robin's response was, oh, so we have a lion in the front, but we also have a lion in the back. Maybe it's the female, the lioness. Then I asked, okay, so maybe it's the lioness, but what are these little white critters? They're kind of hard to see, aren't they? And Robin thought they were hard to see, and she said they look to her like birds of some sort, maybe a dove, or maybe they're chickens. At that point, Susan said that she had thought that they might be chickens also. But because of Robin's having said, oh, look, we have a lion in the front and a lion in the back, Susan wondered, well, if we have a lion and a lamb in the foreground, maybe we have a lion with lambs in the background. And Susan said, maybe it's the artist's way by doubling what we see. Maybe it's the artist's way of emphasizing what we see here, if we see it both here and in the background. So when Robin first saw this painting, she said, oh, the lion lying down with the lamb. And then she said, isn't there a Bible verse about something like that? And the answer is indeed. It is a verse from the book of Isaiah. And I want to read to you a quotation from this verse. It is this, again, from the book of Isaiah. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the young goat, and the calf and the lion and the fattened calf together, and a little child shall lead them. They shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain. So we, after hearing this verse from Isaiah, we were a little perplexed because, of course, the verse says the wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and here we have the lion with the lamb. But I think we get the sense that is conveyed by Isaiah. And we certainly have front and center, the center figure in this painting is a little child. And I'll just read it again. And a little child shall lead them. So what are we seeing here? Let's zoom in a little bit. I've said that this figure of the child who looks so innocent and vulnerable in some ways, no shoes, bare skin exposed, theoretically a little frightening in the company of a lion. Except we see this. We see the little child's hand grasping some of the lion's mane. If you've ever seen a child play with a cat's tail, this will look familiar to you. It's an action of trust, of feeling comfortable, of feeling safe. And in fact, if we take a look right here, if we follow the rump of this lovely little lamb and follow its eyes, they go right to the hand and then right on to this really beautiful, penetrating, but placid face of the lion. We see these three faces coming together. Do you think they look calm? Does the little child look worried at all? Does the lamb look worried at all that the lion is going to attack it? Let's also notice that the lion's body is, in essence, creating almost a haven for the lamb and the little child. The child is resting against the flank of the lion, right? And the lamb is also seemingly resting too against the haunch, the back haunch of the lion. So these observations led us to a discussion about trust, safety, protection, peacefulness. So that brings us to the end of our discussion of this painting. The title of it is Peaceable Kingdom. This painting is done by an artist named James Miller, and we don't know much about him. And again, it's hard to tell what size a painting is looking at it this way, but I want you to know the dimensions are 31 inches by 38 inches. So that's a little under 3 feet by a little over 3 feet. So it's not that different in size than the last painting we looked at. And it is oil on canvas. I want to thank you so much for spending time with me today, looking at these two marvelous pieces from the McMullen Museum of Art at Boston College. Please do join us again for the next video in the series. And do also join us for one of the live Dementia Unplugged ARTFul Insight programs, if you can. We'd love to see you there. In the meantime, I hope that this has given you a sense of just how wonderful it can be to see a work of art as one of our groups said, as a kind of playground for your imagination, for your senses. And I hope you'll enjoy looking at other pieces of art as a result. Thanks so much. I look forward to seeing you again.